Hey, folks, welcome to the Morning Call Show. I'm Bob Sellers here with Jerry Burke, my
Good
esteemed
morning.
former executive producer at a couple
Yep.
networks. And Jerry, we're taking a look. We kind of want to condense a lot of the news that we see into how we expect the different cable networks will cover it, because we've got right, we've got left, and there's certain topics that they play them differently, and in some cases don't play them at all if it doesn't make their side look good.
Yeah. Well, I was watching the morning shows, Today's Show, early show. They're mainly 90% or more lifestyle stuff. They're talking about
Yeah.
new kinds of fingernails, new kinds of hairstyles. Like to them, they're like in a bubble. Nothing's going on. Yet, if I flip over to News Channel, it's Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
Iran negotiations. They're fighting over Hormuz.
Right.
Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
There's just nothing.
Well, I had a couple stories here I wanted to get your thoughts on because I find them interesting and something that I think people can think about when they're looking at how do the networks, how do the parties play this. I mean, we're called the Morning Call Show, and every political group, every network has a morning call in which they kind of formulate how they're going to play certain stories.
Yeah. I don't think
And
a
that,
lot of people realize that, but the GOP, the Democrats, ABC, NBC, every single organization, even IBM, they have a morning call with the boss to kind of set the agenda for the day, the week, the year.
yeah, and the goal is not only what are they going to cover, how are they going to cover it. So I wanted to take a look. First of all, I guess we should put up the jobs numbers that came out today. And I only mention this because I had this graphic, Jerry. I put this
Oh,
together. That
well, of course, it's all doom and gloom, Bob, from your point of view.
Well, yes and no, because 23,000 jobs were lost. They were expecting 83,000 to be added. And let me tell you why this is a mixed picture on Wall Street. Because one of the concerns on Wall Street is they might raise interest rates. This may show a slowing of the economy, which means maybe they don't, because they don't want to slow down the economy if it's slowing on its own. So that may be a positive thing for people looking at the market. I also wanted to get to something that I think is an interesting story. And I know we're going to see this played a couple ways. See if I can find this. Duke Law, the law school.
Oh,
Now, my daughter wants to go to law school. Okay,
yeah.
so she's right in the mix of this. And Duke Law was found by a branch of the Department of Justice to discriminate against whites and Asians, and
Hmm.
that someone who happened to be black had a 3.5 times better chance with the same numbers to get into Duke Law than an Asian person.
Wow.
So I think that that's interesting for a number of reasons. Number one, this is racial discrimination, but you and I are old enough to remember, well, wait a minute, that came around in the early 60s. You were trying
Right.
to protect people of color. Now it's a switch. They're trying to protect people who happen to be a white or Asian, because any discrimination is wrong, technically. But then you have the argument, Jerry, on the left. It's like, well, wait a minute. The system still discriminates against people of color, and shouldn't they be given an opportunity? So, this Department of Justice, no surprise that a Trump administration would find that you were committing racial discrimination, that you
Yeah.
were being racist against whites. Not a shock. But
Yeah.
then people on the left would say, well, it's been unfair for people of color for a very long time. So it makes sense, even though we have to remember the Supreme Court came down and said you cannot use race as far as getting into a law school.
Well, I thought we had already been through this.
Yeah,
I'm a child of the 60s, you
yeah,
know, born in 61. So I came of age 68, 69, 70. I was aware shit was going on.
right.
And a lot of people don't realize the 60s was a lot more than just Woodstock. There were riots in
Oh,
Newark. I remember National Guard tanks in the street. There were people rioting in Washington, Abby Hoffman. There were firebombs, Molotov cocktails. And then, Martin Luther King was assassinated, Bobby was assassinated. It was like I felt the world was coming apart at the seams. And then disco came along and everything was right with the world again. And I remember thinking as a child, 13, 14, thinking, whew, I'm glad that's over. We got all that settled,
Yeah,
you know, equal rights amendment, women got the equal rights amendment, blacks got the vote or whatever. Everything was fine. Everything went back to normal. And then we had the usual stuff, the 80s, the 90s, But then now it's all reared its ugly head again, as if what was
yeah.
all that about?
Well, I tell people when they think things are bad, you should have been around in the late 60s. That was really.
Yeah.
And then I hear people talk about inflation, and I say, you should have been around the late 70s if
Try
you
to
want
buy
to.
a house in the early 80s
Yeah,
at
exactly.
18% mortgage.
However, I will say this, Jerry, it is looking more and more like those eras from one perspective that I would make offer, and that is it's starting to look like we have a government that is not really in control of what's going on. We've got the war, um, and then by the way, when that war hit, let me see if I can find this. I've got if I can find. I thought I loaded this up. See if I got this. Yeah, look at this, Jerry.
Yeah.
These are prices. All
Oh,
right.
gas, buddy. Yeah. I look at that. I just looked at it
Where do
an
you
hour
think the
ago.
Iran war started?
Right there at the very peak
Yeah,
there.
exactly. So it's not a coincidence that that happened. And now, what it appears to me to be is we're having a problem dealing with it, having a problem getting out of it. And until you resolve that, those numbers are not going to come back down to where they were. No matter how much Trump tells you they're falling, they have only fallen a certain amount. And so my perspective is we have less control. Carter was totally out of control. We had the hostages um, in Iran, and then they said that Carter was the 45th hostage or whatever number they had
Yeah,
really
yeah.
because he was in the White House and refused to leave. That showed no power. That's why when Reagan came in, a lot of people were good. He's not helpless. So anyway, I thought that you know it was interesting. We went from Duke Law into how things are going right now with
Right,
gas
right,
prices,
right. I
like
know.
you and I are
But you
able to
remember,
do.
you see, that reminds me, that headline is not written very well because we used to call it reverse discrimination. You remember?
Yes, yes,
So when you see that headline, I'm thinking they intentionally discriminated against blacks. You know,
yeah. But
that's the
discrimination is
historic
just.
value of that
I think
headline.
the Supreme Court had essentially said discrimination is discrimination. And so that's what I find interesting, Jerry, because I agree with you. Like if you had read that 20 years ago or
Yeah,
30 years ago,
yeah.
you wouldn't even have questioned, oh,
No,
well, these
I,
are
I
people.
assume it's a black person. Yeah,
Right. But then over the years, there have been challenges to, hey, wait a minute. This isn't fair to me. I forget the guy's name in the early 80s who filed a complaint saying, I'm white and I didn't get into Berkeley and I should have. It'll come to me at some point. But now we actually have a government who is challenging discrimination against whites,
mm.
against Asians. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I am saying that's where we are politically on the conservative side. And those
Yeah.
on the left would say, if you think everything's equal now, you're not living in the real world. And that's where the argument is.
So I mean, their logic, if you follow it, is that then whites need to be persecuted for at least as long as blacks were. So 300, 400 years.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so this is something that might be worth exploring. I'm old enough to have experienced in my entire life affirmative action, quotas, that sort of thing, to try to give people of color a step toward mainstream America, toward the American dream that they did not have before. And what has happened, I think, in a lot of America, Jerry, is a lot of people saying, how long does this last exactly?
Right.
Because this started in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and we're still doing this, and it's literally 2026, we're still doing this.
Right.
And a lot of people are saying, I look at my community and it looks like people of color are doing pretty well. Now, obviously, it depends on where you live, but economically, just because of your race, do you have a step up? What if you're from Appalachia and you happen
Yeah,
to be?
yeah.
Do you have an advantage then?
Well, I think a lot of it is the media and social media that we hyper focus. Like the accounts that I follow, I get a steady diet of people fighting each other, shoplifting, these street takeovers with the tires spinning and the cops. If you look at my phone, you'd think the world is out of control.
Right,
You know,
right.
uh, and how many other phones like mine are there out there?
Yeah,
Because you get this
all of
hyper focused, hyper digested, like link to you think is reality, but it's not. Like,
yeah,
look what I got out there. Do you see that? Palm
yeah,
trees. I saw a yacht going by before, you
right.
know? Uh,
Yeah, but I would argue, Jerry, that the guy in the yacht's doing pretty well, or the woman on the yacht. But there are a lot of people who are struggling, and they're not the ones that are getting the headlines.
no,
And
no,
I
you're right.
guarantee
You're
you,
right.
they're the
You're
ones that
right.
are voting for Trump to go into office and voting for Mamdani because the system might not be working for them quite the same way.
Well, you had the same reaction. I'm often reminded of my father who came from Ireland. And we'd be out he loved Sunday drives, and we'd be out and we'd drive up into the rich parts where the doctors and lawyers lived in Montclair, New Jersey.
Yeah.
And we'd be driving down this beautiful boulevard and we'd see this beautiful mansion on a hill. And me and my brother and sister would be like, oh, look at that. Literally, my father would take his hand off the wheel, make a fist, and shout up the hill, going, "You bastard!" And then go back to driving. I'm like, what was that about? He was
Hmm.
seething with jealousy and rage that guy was sitting fat and happy up on the hill. You
And
know,
how do you translate that to what's going on now?
well, I see this with Antifa. I see this with Gen Z and millennials. I see that a lot of them are either really angry at others' success or they seem to just have want to throw in the towel and not do anything.
Hmm.
What happened to the great American lifestyle? The great American dream. It seems to be caving.
Yeah, the middle class has shrunk. Those who are well off are doing better. Those on the lower echelon of wealth are not doing as
Yeah.
well as they were before. So,
But I mean, the thing is, we all live in our own little bubbles. And
mhm,
when I went to watch my son graduate at West Point, I
yeah,
was in a teeming stadium of tens of thousands of families of all walks of life, black, white, Asian, brown,
yes,
and they were all united in one thing, America.
yeah,
And I remember Pete Hegseth was speaking and people were crying. They were so filled with pride.
right.
Um, and a lot of the people there, they didn't step off, Harvard stage to collect another degree. Most of them were working class,
Right.
and this embodied. I felt like I was in a church at some points. It was beautiful.
Well, you should be very proud to have a son to go through there,
Well, I
because
just
that,
think that a lot more people need to see things like that,
yeah,
not just watch it on TV, but to be a part of it,
right.
you know, and not
Well,
not.
I don't know if we need to get to this point, Jerry, but I do believe that we should have mandatory service. And
I agree.
I don't think it should necessarily be in the military, but you should at least work in the government because people are pretty ignorant now. They can live their whole lives and not be touched by war, even as
Right.
others are dying, and not be touched by what's going on in the government, not have a role in any way, shape, or form, and just criticize, not have skin in the game.
Right.
And I think in return for that service, we as a government then should pay at least for part of college. So kind of like
Right.
a GI Bill to get people educated.
No, that's a
I
great
don't think
idea.
we don't need 4 years. 3 years is fine. There's a lot of waste in there. It's way too expensive. And I think mandatory service with the return of at least an associate's degree, I think would go a long way to getting this country back on
Has
track.
have we crafted a platform yet of what we are and what this show's about? I think the number one plank that goes in there. I want to make a poster and take you up to Capitol Hill and walk you around.
And if elected.
Yeah.
Okay, let's
But you're
move
right,
on.
because then what you end up with is a bunch of vegan blue hairs obsessed with hamsters and just against everything that anybody wants to say. They're just
Right.
contrary, as the Irish would call them, you
Yeah.
know? And remember what Marlon Brando or James Dean, what are you rebelling against? What do you got?
What do you got?
You know?
Yeah. Well, I think one of our problems, though, is we've created a society and a political ecosystem in which running for government, running for office is actually fairly easy.
Yeah.
Governing is not.
Yeah.
And so the hard thing is to actually make the right decisions when you are in office. But all these guys that run for office, don't they sound good? I mean, that includes Trump. And I think he got a free pass with COVID. So they said, well, things weren't that bad when he was in before. Let's give him another try. And now
Yeah.
things aren't going all that smoothly, I think, according to the polls. So
Yeah.
governing is hard. And because people want to go destroy the system, they want to go break everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, but somebody you and I both know, Santorum, Rick Santorum, the former senator from Pennsylvania,
Pennsylvania.
he used to say, "You still have to govern."
Yeah. No, you're
All right.
right.
There's
Um,
another thing that. Did you have something?
I have the photo of the day.
Okay.
I have the envelopes of pain.
Oh, okay.
And that's
Look at that.
Fauci taking out the
I brought
garbage.
up the picture of
Fauci
Fauci.
taking out the garbage. Well, these two envelopes are from Rand Paul, and one of them is going to Nancy Pelosi, and the other one is on its way. It's on Todd Blanche's desk.
Okay.
So, and now Rand Paul, did you see what he did? He sidestepped the entire Senate and he
Yeah.
sent these charges right from his own committee.
Yeah.
Like, I thought you were supposed to, vote it out of committee, send it out to the Senate, and then you could send it forward it to Nancy Pelosi. I mean, not
Well,
Nancy Pelosi,
also the argument being made in defense of Fauci,
Janine
who,
Pirro.
uh, well, the defense is Fifth Amendment is literally part of the Constitution, and by the way, our president took that in a case out
Yeah,
of New York.
yeah.
We
But
have.
Rand's argument is that the fifth didn't apply to the testimony he was asked to give.
I think that's a fair argument. I mean, if you are pardoned, come answer some questions because we do want to know more what went on
Right,
because we don't want this to happen again. Right?
right,
Uh,
right. The fifth was not meant as a device to cover up facts.
and in fact, my understanding, and neither one of us are lawyers, is that if you take the fifth, now you have no worries. So you need to tell the truth. However, now you've got multiple states saying, we're going to try to
Right,
charge him with state crimes. And it's like, well, you just justified him taking the fifth, and now you're
right. I
not going
know.
to get any more
Like,
information. Hope you
are you
got what
interested
you
in
need.
are you interested in the truth, or are you interested in getting political brownie points?
Yeah, and I don't see any way the full Senate. But you know what? It's like you pointed out, Rand Paul went straight to the DOJ because I don't
Yeah.
think with this administration it matters. They don't care whether
Well,
the
also, I think Rand is a bit impulsive to begin with, as we know,
yeah,
but he
right,
knew if he sent it out to the wider Senate, it would just get bogged down for months and it would go by
right,
the wayside. He
right.
knows what he has.
Yeah, he does. I do wonder how much he likes the attention because I don't know how effective it is to have somebody there for hours taking the fifth. It's a show. It's a show.
Well, do me a favor, show the Fauci picture again.
Okay.
There you go. That is a man who's not having a good week. Do you feel like a rock star now, Dr. Fauci?
Yeah. Well, this is another thing, Jerry. And again, don't interpret this, folks. I can believe two things. I can believe Fauci did a bad job, but I can also believe, a diary. Come
I
on.
know. And you know what? He should never have messed with the Kennedys.
Well, there you go. Okay.
Uh,
Let me
I,
remind
g-
you of this
Okay.
See if I can find the. Am
Oh,
I?
you've been a busy guy.
Yeah, look
Who's
at this.
that?
Remember this guy, Elon Musk,
Oh
with the.
yeah, yeah, with the chainsaw. I
Okay,
I I have to say that was a bit much.
it was a bit much, and the promise of $2 trillion of waste, fraud, and abuse was a bit much. And
Yeah,
here's the thing, Jerry. It was used by the right. Oh man, they just threw that. Trump just in the early days, they just threw it out there. Well, you can't be against finding waste, fraud, and abuse, can you? And no, and this is the guy that created Tesla, and he's got SpaceX, and well, okay. And then, but he didn't find that. Not only did he not find $2 trillion worth, the number they came up with was something like 210 billion. Now, you and I would both say, hey, every dollar found waste fraud. That's good.
yeah,
But then we come to find out the GAO, the Government Accounting Office, looked into it and only found most of that number was bogus. They were saying a lot of these contracts were expiring anyway, and that DOGE couldn't justify or prove a lot of the other claims. They didn't come with a concrete number, but it sounded
yeah,
like it wasn't even close to 210 billion. Again, we're all for finding waste, fraud, and abuse. What I'm trying to point out is this was a political game that if they could find waste, fraud, and abuse, okay, but it became clear that they weren't going to, but they continued to use it along the
yeah.
way.
Well, I think one of the biggest things to come out of all that that has not really been followed up on is the elimination of funding to the agency called USAID,
Yeah, that's
which
true. That was the
shoveled
first thing to go. Yeah.
and they but their job had been to shovel money to non-governmental organizations all around the world, like the crazy things like trans dance lessons in Ethiopia, all that crazy crap.
Assuming that
And
was actually going on, yes. I mean,
you
yeah.
just had to stick that in there in the back, right?
Well, because, there's something in the political world nowadays is you throw something out there, it's red meat to the masses. They go, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then you find out later that wasn't true, but you had the moment. You
I
were able
no,
to.
I tend to think that there's probably stuff out there that would make your jaw drop. That's happening right
Well,
now.
yeah, that's probably true. I will say this.
I got one last story though for
Let
you.
me throw in just one more thing
Okay.
before you get to that, and that
Yeah.
is the reason this GAO study happened was a request from two Democratic senators. Okay, so that's again part of they wanted to get something bad
I,
out there,
I have to
right?
check. I'm checking Snopes on that. It's a likely
No, it was
likely
Blumenthal
story,
and Gary
Bob.
Peters. Blumenthal and Peters.
Okay. Likely story. But this one gave me a chuckle.
Okay.
Gavin Newsom's rush to embrace Abdul El Sayed
Hmm.
makes this is an opinion article makes me sick to my stomach. When the dust settled Wednesday, Abu El Sayed had narrowly won Michigan's Democratic nomination for U.S. Senate, and
Yeah.
Gavin Newsom did not need much time to think anything more about it. He rushed
Okay.
to El Sayed's side.
I've said it before. The Democrats have a Michigan problem. It kind of
And don't they have a
synopsizes.
Gavin problem?
Gavin, I don't see that wearing well over time. And you know
Mhm.
why? He works in New York. He works in California. Okay, he works among the elites who are having wine
Mhm.
but you and I remember Democrats like Bill Clinton,
Yeah,
good old boy. You
yeah,
know, those are the kinds of voters. Those voters have pretty much gone. Remember they had something called Reagan Democrats, right?
yeah,
Well, they became Trump Republicans,
yeah.
and now the Democrats are having problems getting them back.
Yeah, no, you're right. So now that the socialists have infiltrated the Democratic Party, you know, uh, Fetterman wants them just to run as socialists. Just create your own party, do your own thing.
Not a bad idea.
Not a bad
But
idea.
then that would eliminate them from the primaries, and take that problem away from the Democrats. That would
Right.
be his solution. And I've always been intrigued by why we just have two major parties, because over in Europe they have all kinds of parties, right? But
Yeah,
we
yeah,
just
they do. Like the Italians, there's like 74 parties every election, you
and
know?
so now maybe it's because they're more parliamentary based. A lot of the governments over there, in which the legislature would pick their prime minister. We pick a president directly, but I think it's because the two parties work their best to keep everybody out,
Right.
right?
True. And
And that,
and how did John Fetterman become like the guiding light of truth and logic for the
well,
Democrats?
here's my theory. There's a difference between I used to live in West Virginia. There's a difference between a Democrat in West Virginia in the 1980s under Reagan and a Democrat living with Nancy Pelosi in San Francisco today. They and so whoever calls themselves a Democrat, when you look at Fetterman's age, it's like Manchin, also a Democrat. Those guys came up at a time that a Democrat was like Kennedy. They went to visit the guys in the mines.
Yeah.
Those guys were hardworking, blue collar. I mean, it was a dirty collar,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so the Democrats related to them. The those who were trying to represent them were trying to pass laws to protect their health and make sure they got paid enough. Well, the Democrats today of San Francisco,
Mm.
that's a different world
Oh, forget
than
about it. Forget
the
about it.
coal mine.
No. No, they're not Democrats. They're some awful hybrid that hatched from an egg, from a crashed spaceship.
And that's how, to me, Fetterman is the guy that's kind of a remnant of the old school Democrat, just like Manchin is. But they're trying to transition, and he sees the arguments on the conservative side that make
Yeah.
sense.
And
But
yesterday, boy, I saw Fetterman last night on TV wearing a jacket and a tie.
was he going somewhere?
No, I think this has made his brain snap, and he's become like a new person. I think he
He would
needed
be.
that. He, he just needed that inciting incident to snap him back to reality.
Yeah, I don't know. It's funny because both sides like Fetterman, but they're always on the verge of not liking Fetterman.
Mm.
When he doesn't say what they want, the Republicans are trying to say, "Come on over. The water's
Yeah, yeah.
fine. Be a
Well,
Republican."
and he on Sean the other night, he was ripping Bernie a new butt, saying, "What did Bernie do? Bernie Sanders, the most votes he's ever gotten is in his own state, 640,000. He's never been able to flip one seat anywhere else. I have, you know." So yeah, there's definitely a fray there. Like, why doesn't Bernie split off with all these other people like Al Sayed and start a third party?
Yeah, I would even argue that the Democrats have lost their power. The Clinton nucleus, the Clinton Pelosi nucleus of the Democratic Party that
Yeah,
controlled the party has gone away, lost its power. Nancy
yeah.
just is too old to be involved every day. Hakeem Jeffries
No.
is not a great leader. And you have, in Clinton's, they had great power. And by the way, the reason that you and I can tell people that Nancy Pelosi was an effective speaker is because Republicans will tell you that. They will
Yeah.
talk about what an iron hand she ran the House and her party. Well, that power is going away. And so it's leaking to the left. And just like your former boss, Roger Ailes, used to say, that he had to keep his hand on the wheel at Fox, otherwise it veers
It
to the
would
left.
turn to the left. Yeah. I remember that. He said that a lot. But we must do something to preserve Jim Carville's sanity.
I don't know. It's kind of like that was the 90s. And I don't know what this Democratic Party is. You and I already had the conversation where this is not the Kennedy Democratic Party. And I
Right.
would argue now it's not the Clinton Democratic Party. So
No.
whose is it? I don't know.
Allah, Allah Akbar.
Oh, wow. That went dark pretty fast.
Well, I am Irish at the end of the day.
Oh, no.
We
As we
tend to
come to,
brood. We tend to brood about stuff.
yeah. Well, I think that it's funny because if you look at the polls, it shows the Democrats should do well, even though I think it's overrated, especially with the gerrymandering that's gone on for Republicans.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
when you look at who's the leadership of the Democratic Party, I don't see it. Not right now.
yeah. Okay. Well, I think we need to wrap it up. Do you have any final
Okay.
thoughts?
I do not.
Um, okay. We might want to edit this down a little bit to get it closer to 20.
I will. Yeah, you should have
But
wrapped me.
but good convo. Good
Okay.
convo. And it's Friday. And
Yes.
remember, don't mess with the Kennedys.
Okay. Bye, Jerry.
Bye.